This is part 2 of the vocal booth build. So if you watched part 1, you saw me get to this stage, assembled all the frames, attached the boards to create the complete panels, just like this one here, which is the door. I mean, I wish I could communicate to you how heavy these things are, but maybe you can gauge from the amount of energy I was putting into holding that thing. I bought a bunch of things since the last episode and I'm gonna have to do a price breakdown. I wanted to keep everything under €200, but it's blown out past that. I'll do an overlay or something here, but I think it's at around 370 or €380, which is around 500 and something Australian dollars. This happens with most DIY projects, I think. But the one thing I'm confident of is that this thing is still a lot less expensive than a professional solution you could get from a professional company. Even some of the solutions you can buy for 1,000 to €1,500, I don't think will be as effective as this, but we'll need to wait until it's finished so I can see. Now that it's all together and I know that it works, I need to firstly figure out how to mount that heavy ass door. I'm hoping that these 2 hinges are going to be enough. I maybe need to step it up to 4. My biggest worry is that the screws are going to pull out of the material. So if the door is too heavy, only 16 millimeters of timber, that perhaps it could break out. But I have 2, so I'm going to try that, and if not, then we'll try 4. And these hinges are lift-off hinges. I'll put the door on while the thing's laying down flat and screw the hinges in, and then I can slide the door off so that I don't have to tilt the whole thing up with the door. It just makes it easier to remove the door. If you're separating the whole thing down into parts for transport or something, you don't want to have to unscrew the door. The frames and the boards are attached to each other using just regular timber screws. I used the same thing to attach all of the panels to each other, but that's not the end game. I want this thing to be able to be disassembled and reassembled in case you want to move it to another place. And that doesn't really work with timber screws because eventually the hole that it's screwing into in the timber is going to get worn out and it's going to thread, so they're not going to screw in anymore. Instead, I have some threaded inserts and some countersunk bolts. Basically, this screws into a hole with a hex key, but it actually has a thread inside. And then these stainless steel bolts can thread into that while this is threaded into the wood, which means that I can keep screwing and unscrewing that without damaging the thread because the thread is actually metal. So this will be screwed and glued into the timber. So along those same lines, if I use timber screws to attach these hinges into the door, they're far more likely to be able to be pulled out. So my idea is that I'll use some bolts. I have these M5 by 30mm bolts. So they'll go through the hinges, and then on the back, I'll either use some washers or these metal plates. These metal plates will work a lot better. The only problem is that these holes don't line up with the holes on the hinge. Even though they're the same size as the hinge, the holes don't line up. So I'll need to see if I can drill my own holes without a vise or anything to hold these. But if I can, then that will work much better. Then I have these magnets, which I'm going to screw on to hold the door closed. I just have a door handle to put on the door so I can open and close it from the outside. This door handle is actually from a mod duo, so it's a little Easter egg for you. There's 2 more things I should mention that I bought since the last part. You can see on the edge of this board that it's raw and doesn't look very good. It's also quite easy to damage. So I bought this melamine edging, melamine, however you want to say it. It's just an edge strip. It's adhesive and you actually attach it with heat. So the other thing that I had to buy is an iron. I mean, there's special tools you can use to attach this stuff, but just a household iron will work fine. And this is only like €10 or something on Amazon. These 2 things will protect the edges and it'll mean everything looks a little bit neater. Everything will be white. So I'm going to do that today too. Some other things I bought: cheap staple gun and some staples. And this is basically so I can stretch this fabric over the frames and use this staple gun to staple it in. The last thing I bought is some extra felt feet. The ones I put on there got completely squashed flat, and that's just because the thing weighs so much. Other things I have is this bath mat from IKEA. It's going to make the floor. This thing's perfect, I think. It has a rubber back, so it's not going to slide around, so I don't even need to attach it. And it's really thick and lush. Basically, I would never use this as a bathroom mat. I think it would be disgusting. But being thick like this means it's going to absorb sound as well, and you can walk on it. I got this package in the mail, which is a bunch of fabric. It's about the cheapest fabric I could buy just by the meter. I think it's called Bi-Stretch or something. I'm not sure exactly if it's cotton or polyester, but it's fairly strong. It's not too thick, but the main thing that I wanted it to do is to stop fibers coming off the insulation so that you wouldn't inhale any fibers or anything, which this is dense enough that it will protect from that. Some people use hessian and stuff for these kinds of things, but I don't think hessian is really thick enough. I mean, it's thick enough that you can't see me through it, so I think that's good. I bought 11 meters of that. I calculated from my CAD model that 11 meters would be enough to cover all of the panels. And that's going to be covering this insulation, which I already had from the beginning. So the last thing that I bought was from IKEA, actually. LED strips. They're just really short ones, and they're powered by USB. And the idea is that I'll glue these in the top, up here. The booth is actually going to have a USB port inside it, so that I can have a USB device inside the booth which is connected to my computer, which is outside of the booth. So I'll have a USB port on the inside and the outside, and that USB device could be a keyboard if I want to control the computer to press record or to undo and redo, or it could be an audio interface inside the booth, so I could actually record the audio directly into a device with a short audio cable and then just run USB out to the computer. On the outside, I'll have this USB-B jack, which will be as if the vocal booth is a USB device, which I can connect to my computer. And on the inside, I'll have this USB-A jack, which means that I can plug devices inside the booth into here, which will then get connected to the computer. And behind this jack will be where I'll split the wires off to power the LED strips. Basically what that means is as long as there is USB going into the booth, then there'll be USB power, and that can power these lights. And that means that I don't have to have any other power cables or anything like that. The only things going into the booth will be USB and audio cables. Even though I think I can manage the high voltage stuff, I would rather avoid it if I can. One, because it's dangerous, and two, because technically it's not really legal for me to do that, so USB lights is much easier. These are the jacks I'll be installing on the booth. This one here, female XLR jack, it's going on the outside. This will be like the entire booth is a microphone which I'll plug into my interface. The male version of that will go on the inside. This one will go in the roof, so I can plug the mic cable into that and into the microphone. Then inside the booth, I'll have this mic stand, and this just has one of my SM7s on it. This is a tabletop mic stand, and I realized it would work just as well if it was a rooftop mic stand. So I'm going to screw this into the ceiling of the booth. That means I get height adjustment here, and it means I don't have a stand in front of me because it's hanging down from the ceiling. I need to figure out a way to mount this to the ceiling as well. So now I just need to lay this thing back down, separate it back into its individual panels again, wrap all of the frames with the fabric, put the insulation inside, and then assemble the panels back together, put the hinges on so I can hang the door, install the audio jacks, the USB jacks, and all the other hardware like magnets and door handles and everything, and hopefully I can put it all back together and see how it looks. We can see if the lights work, everything black inside, and see if it actually blocks out some sound. I probably should have gotten some help with this. I'd be lying if I said that it didn't suck. So now I've got the panels separated. I'm just disassembling the boards from the frames. Here I'm just laying out the edging strip and cutting it to size. My method for attaching the edging changed over time. In the beginning, I'd sort of just take one quick pass over it to heat up the adhesive and just get it to stick. and then I go back over it more vigorously, sort of pushing down and going back and forth so that it really heats up the adhesive and gets it to stick really well. Then I would just run a blade edge flat along the wood so that it was only cutting the edging and not scratching the actual surface. Now I'm laying out the fabric so that I can roughly cut it to size. Doing a rough cut first makes it a bit easier to stretch and staple the fabric. I just thought I'd leave all of this part in so that you can see the process of stapling it. So I've done the edging on this melamine board. You can see the white on the edge there. And I've wrapped the frame with the fabric. That turned out really well. That was the first time I've ever done that. I basically followed a video on how to stretch canvases for painting and just did the same thing with this. And that worked pretty well. The only thing you have to keep in mind is that they say to start from the middle and work outwards and sort of work around in a circle. But because this is such a long rectangular shape, you actually need to do a lot more on the long edges before you do the ends. So you should do the first four staples in the center, but then work out from the middle to the edges until you're about the same distance from the corner, and then you can move in together. Because if you were to go to the edge here, when you're moving along here, then it's going to be really uneven. At least I think I'm not an expert in this at all. It's the first time I've ever done it. But it worked out really well. There's no creases or anything. So now I'm gonna finally open the packet of insulation, put 2 pieces in here, flip this back over, try and realign it. I can't see the screw holes anymore now there's fabric there, so I'll try to find the screw holes. Hopefully they're not covered with staples, and I'll screw this back in, and that'll be one panel finished. The insulation is a perfect fit. That's not by accident. That's the advantage of designing things in CAD before, and checking out what materials are available before you design something, because now it means I don't have to do any cutting of this stuff, and being that it's very fibrous and messy, and I'm working in an apartment rather than a workshop, that's really ideal that I don't need to do any cutting. So I'm handling it carefully so I don't make too much dust or anything. Just place it into the slot and put the board on top. I just remembered this is one important thing you should do when disassembling things that have already been assembled the correct way. It's just to mark which end it is. So I'm just writing that this is the bottom. And that's not just for this time. I'll actually need that as a permanent reminder if I disassemble this and reassemble it. So I might go and get a Sharpie so I can write that on there permanently. Since it's on the bottom, you'll never see it, so it shouldn't matter. So that's the first panel done. And I have to say, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. It did get a fair bit heavier, but it looks good. I think it's nice and clean with these white edges and with the black fabric. I was worried that this would be a bit like, floppy material, obviously resting on something underneath it, but it actually feels just like an upholstered couch or something, like a padded wall. It's nice and tight, and the foam is quite firm, so I'm really excited to see how this goes. So now I just need to do 4 more panels, go to the next part.